seen two kinds of growth in my life. I've lived in Las Vegas since 1988 and watched that, the growth in the last 20 years there, which is pretty staggering. And the other, of course, was ESPN. So it was pretty remarkable. And of course, now, as many of you know, I do the boxing on Showtime, and it's been a lot of fun being there and doing a lot of the major fights with Showtime, and it's been very, very enjoyable. And let me end my part of it before we get to the questions by saying that boxing is in a very unique position right now, in my opinion. Even if everybody doesn't know it, the actual product that boxing is putting out there has gotten much better in the last 6 or 7 years. Boxing went through an abyss, I think, in the 1990s, where matches that were important weren't being made, and it was really, I think, affecting the fans, because you can't be a casual boxing fan, right? Nobody, if I was to quiz everybody here on who the champions are in the 482,000 divisions that boxing has, you wouldn't be able to tell me, I wouldn't be able to tell you. And on top of that, in every division there's 4 different champions. So that makes it very hard to be a casual boxing fan, and we don't have order and structure, which sports fans like. The only sport that has been prospering over all the years without us knowing who the champion is college football. For many reasons, that sport is bulletproof, and no matter what happens in terms of a championship series, and every year, don't we always every year say, oh, this is the year, that thing's going to get so screwed up, they'll have to have a championship playoff. Well, they never do. Although now I think the president's in favor of that. So we're here. But boxing is one of those, is a sport that suffers from people not knowing who's champion. So the product is really all it has. And the product in the 90s wasn't good because people wouldn't fight each other. Promoters and managers and fighters and trainers even couldn't figure out a way to have the best fights happen. And so what happened is the mainstream media stopped covering boxing, and when we got to about 2001, the sport had fallen into a niche and looked like it was going to fall lower. What happened was, probably not by design, because most things don't happen in boxing by design, maybe by accident, everybody just figured out, perhaps out of desperation, we need to make the matches that matter. They've been doing that for about 7 years, and what's happened is, even though the mainstream media has been slow to come around to cover the sport, it's inching its way back, and the sport at least held on to its base. And so that part is good news for boxing. And the other good news for boxing, and I'll end with this, is that around the country, both at venues like this and also at many, obviously many Indian and riverboat casinos around the country, there is grassroots boxing that people like you can enjoy. And as long as that exists, the sport will have a certain degree of health. So I'm delighted to be here, and I'll be happy to accept your questions. Yes?
What do you think about this heavyweight division? You got so many champions, and I couldn't even tell you, besides Klitschko, who the other guys are.
Okay, so there's some things about boxing that aren't perfect. Like the heavyweight division, yeah. Well, here's the thing about the heavyweight division. It's always been the division that has less depth than any other division. But what we've always had is 2 or 3 really terrific fighters at the top, then kind of a little schism, chasm I should say, a break down to the next level of talent. But now in the heavyweight division, we don't have those 2 or 3 great fighters, do we? We have some that are kind of known, like the Klitschkos, but they're not great. They're okay. They're decent fighters, but they're not great. And we keep going down. So the problem is the talent pool in the heavyweight division, and I would offer this, I would actually make this bold a statement. It's the only division in boxing that has a weak talent pool right now. Even the division right below it, the cruiserweight division, which nobody knows who the cruiserweight champions are, right? It's a division that has labored in anonymity. The cruiserweight division has 7 or 8 really, really good fighters who always fight each other. And Showtime's been a great, great network to work at. My only regret is that we've put on some really good cruiserweight fights, and I've had a hard time convincing them to do more of those cruiserweight fights. Because I'm telling you, there hasn't been a bad cruiserweight championship fight in the last 4 years, but we haven't seen a lot of them because they've been in Europe and other places. But as far as the heavyweights go, it's the one division in boxing that is subpar in terms of its talent. And inevitably, especially in America, we like to judge boxing based upon the heavyweight division. And you really, unfortunately now you can't, because it's just not a division that's great. One of the young men who people hope will create a lot of interest in America is Chris Arreola, of course, from California here, who's a very powerful heavyweight, has a fun guy to watch. He's aggressive. He wants to fight. And the question will be, how refined are his skills? Refined enough to beat some of these other heavyweights that that have certain skill level? He's going to face one of the Klitschkos, and one of the things about the Klitschkos, despite the fact that they're somewhat flawed, they are very tall. They have a certain athletic ability, especially Vitaly Klitschko is one of the toughest guys on the planet to fight. We saw that with Sam Peter recently. Came back after a 4-year layoff.